My name is Zach Dressel, and I am the Assistant Director and Curator at the Earl Scruggs Center, located in Shelby, North Carolina. And I want to welcome you to the fourth part of our ongoing series on historic property research in North Carolina, specifically Cleveland County, but using concepts that can be used throughout the state, certainly, maybe throughout the country if you're from another state. Some of these things, there might be resources similar to the ones that we've used in this series that you can find in your home state. Um, and I certainly hope that's the case. Uh, I know that there are several states that have things similar to what we're going to be talking about today, which is what I think to be one of the greatest online repositories for North Carolina historical artifacts, collections, um, it's one that I use constantly when doing property research and just in general when doing research on local history. It's one that I go back to time and time again, and we'll talk about the reasons for that as we kind of go through it. I'm, of course, talking about DigitalNC, which is a repository of over 300 libraries, museums, and archives collections that have been digitized and made searchable online. It's incredibly important. I cannot overstate it. I know I've already said it. I'll say it again. One of the greatest things that has happened to history in North Carolina is DigitalNC, and I will always sing their praises. So let's take a look at their website. This is the DigitalNC's homepage, and as you can see, it's kind of broken up into two large sections. So we have collections and newspapers, and we'll talk about what both of those are. Briefly talk about how to use each of those tools, and a couple of other things in looking at it through the scope of property research. I'm not going to really get so much into the local history stuff. I'm going to really try to hone in on property research and how these tools that DigitalNC has can help you achieve your property research goals. Before we get into talking about these two things, I want to first show you guys some really cool ways that you can search things. So there's a counties section where it will show you every county that they have collections from, which is just about all of them. And then you can click on a specific county. So, for example, we're going to click on Cleveland, and you can click on it again, and it will show you only things from that county. So, it will show us the 11 newspaper titles that they have from this county. That is to say, 11 newspapers, not specific issues of that paper. And then their collection of over 948 objects. That's yearbooks, catalogs, photographs, other types of media, you name it. They've got it. But I want to go back to this main page for what we're going to use today, which is we're going to take a look at their city directory collection, which when you're doing property research, they have a fantastic collection of Shelby city directories and Kings Mountain city directories, both of which are incredibly useful, and I'll show you how we use those. The easiest way to kind of go about this is to start by searching for a location, is what I like to do, because it will pull up every directory from that given city. So I'm putting in Shelby, and when I click on that, it's going to show me every city directory they have from Shelby, North Carolina. So as we can see, it looks like they started in 1937 and they go through to 1964. You got to be careful. They snuck in a Kings Mountain on you. That's 1959. But this is a really good record of the city directories. Now, caveat to this, I know that there are other ones that exist. For example, we have a couple in our collection from the early 1930s. There was also one that was done in 1929 that we have in our collection, and I believe the Eugenia. There was also one done in 1929 that we have in our collection, and I believe also the county library has in their collection. So there are other resources available in person, but these are just the online digital ones that we're worried about today. So I wanted to look at this 1937 to 38, and I'm going to give you guys a little tip. This is why we're doing this video series, is so that I can give you tips to make your lives easier. As you can see right now, this is just scrolling down and looking at a book, and it's a big book. There's a lot of pages, 248 pages in this book. It would be very difficult to get the information you might want looking at it this way. So I strongly suggest doing this. I suggest downloading it and opening it in a separate tab. I've gone ahead and downloaded this one, and I'll show you why. Two reasons. For one, you get to see the full page, which is really nice. And secondly, this makes it somewhat of a searchable document. So what you can do is you can hit Control F to use the find function, and we can put in, for example, Blanton. This is going to turn up 331 results. But now it's going to take me through and show me every instance of Blanton in this entire book. Makes it way easier when you're trying to search either a specific person that might have owned your property, or even maybe a specific address or a specific business that might be linked to your specific property. Another kind of cheat Another kind of cheat that I use that I really like is these books have a really cool feature towards the bottom. Let's head down, where they go road by road and tell you who lived in various places. I have used this more times than almost any other form of property research document when it comes to trying to figure out how things were laid out and how things were. A really cool example of this, let's go down and look at Warren Street. Okay. So we know we have an East Warren and a West Warren, and they intersect at the middle part of the court square. That's something that is always easy to remember. East Warren and West Warren hit each other in the alley that splits the court square on that specific side of the court square. So on East Warren, we can see here, let me see if I can get it zoomed in a little bit. At 2 East Warren, which these are not the current, that's another thing that's important to note. The address is changed at a certain point. Now this, I believe, would be considered 102 East Warren. We have a Pendleton's music store. We have an Austell barber shop, web building, yada, yada, yada. You go down the list. And what's really great is you can figure out, okay, I live in, 300, or I guess 901 Walnut Street. Here's who lived in 901 Walnut Street in 1937-38, and how many people lived in their house? 7. It's a great way to not only see who lived there, but who their neighbors might have been, how long they lived there, because as we established, you have these from 1937 to 1964. And so you can kind of trace the lineage of a home, business, property over the course of 20 years, just using this, resource. Cannot express enough how important these directories are, and they're all laid out pretty much the same. If they're made by the same manufacturer, this Miller's directory, they're all going to be roughly the same. So I would strongly encourage checking out the city directories function. And again, they have directories from all over the place. So if you're watching this video and you are not from Shelby, not from Kings Mountain, not from Cleveland County, I strongly encourage you to use this resource just to see what is available from where you live. Now, if you live outside of North Carolina, I would strongly encourage you to find what similar resources might be available in your state. I know that they do exist. South Carolina has some things. Tennessee has some things. I've even looked at places like Ohio, and they have stuff similar to this. So definitely take the time to learn what resources your area has. Um, but let's jump back, and I'm going to do a brief run through of the newspapers function because it is very stout. There's a lot going on. There's, just a ton. But when you're using the newspapers function, I strongly encourage people to use the advanced search function. You might say, that I don't know if I can handle advanced. This is the first time I've gone on this website. Well, I promise you can. It's very easy to use. If anything, I think it's easier to use than a standard search because it's going to get you what you want faster, which is what we're all about. So let's have some fun. Let's just type in something random. We've been talking about Warren Street. Let's type in Warren Street. I strongly encourage anybody searching with this to use the with the phrase function here. What that's going to allow for you to do is it will basically use every word that you say. You can tell I've already used this to search other people. So for example, when I type Warren Street, I'm going to do it this way. When I type Warren Street, it is going to take that as everything I want it to search. It's not going to give me one word and then another word. It's not going to give me Warren. Every time Warren is said and every time street is said, it is going to only give me every time Warren Street is used. And I strongly encourage people not to use periods whenever they're doing things on this site because sometimes that can freak it out. It can take periods and go in wonky places. It's just something about the search functionality of this site. We're looking at Cleveland County. So let's look at Cleveland County. Again, if you're watching from outside of Cleveland County, they have papers from every single county in North Carolina. So definitely take the opportunity to use them. And I'm not going to put a year limit on this, but if you know a specific year that you're looking for, you can certainly do the year function. And I want to search all of the newspapers from Cleveland County. So I'm not going to break it out based on specific newspapers, although you can do that. You can only search in certain newspapers. So let's search and see what it gives me. All right. So it's going to give me first what it thinks is the most relevant results to my search. And then it will start out that way. So obviously here we have an article from 2014 in the Kings Mountain paper. And here, see, Warren Street. Here it's still Warren Street, Warren Street, Warren Street, Warren Street. So you can use this. So we know that Dragonfly Wine Market was on Warren Street, even, and it still is. But, so that's useful. But what you can do, which was what I do a lot, is if you don't want the most relevant information, you can say, okay, give me the oldest first. So let's go back in time to the oldest it will give me, 1903. It should be said, Cleveland Stars, they have run from 1902 to around 1936, and then there's some random issues in 45, I think. There's other papers that they have that go back further. The oldest paper that they have goes back to the 1860s. There was a paper called the Mountain Eagle that had a limited run during the Civil War. They do have some of those, but mainly your newspapers start in around the 1880s and go forward from there. Let's see how well this did at picking up Warren Street. So here we've got a lot for sale by a East Warren Street. Here's another lot for sale by a Clark, West Warren Street. So their search function works extremely well, but you can see where sometimes it's still only picking up the street. But even if it does that, it's going to give you some results that give you that Warren Street. But as you can see here also, there's no period at the end of this street. So that's why I tell people not to use periods, because sometimes they do and sometimes they don't in the papers. And whether they do or don't, as long as you don't put a period in yours, it'll pick it up every time. So I strongly encourage you to use this to play around with. If you know of historic homeowners who owned your property or a property that you're researching, you can put their names in here and find where they show up in newspapers. If you have an address, you can try addresses. A lot of times they're not going to work because in historic newspapers, they just never really printed addresses up to a certain point. Now, once you get into the 50s and 60s, you can start finding that a little bit more, but pre 1950, I think you'll have a hard time finding addresses. Also, remember that there was an address change that happened, so you will need to kind of do some of the deed research and do some of the map research and some of the GIS research that we did in previous videos to help figure out, did your property undergo an address change? And if it did, what was the old address? And start incorporating that into your searching. So all that is to say, this is the final video in this series, and I really hope that this was helpful for people who are starting to learn how to do property research in your area. Again, doesn't have to be Cleveland County. These are Cleveland County specific tools that I'm using, but they are very similar to tools that you can find in other places all throughout the country. If you have any questions, I encourage you to leave those in the comments, and I will try to answer them as best as I can. Also, feel free to contact me, Zach Dressel, at the Earl Scruggs Center, and I would be happy to answer any and all questions. My email address is curator@earlscruggscenter.org, and I will put that up on the video right now so you can see it. And I hope you all enjoyed it, and look forward to doing one of these sometime in the near future.